Let me just get one more wave at the camera so everyone can hear me. I just want to make sure before we get started today. Okay, excellent. So first of all, my name is Louis, and I would like to thank you so much for joining me today on Zoom for my foam rolling demonstration. I would like to introduce my lovely assistant, ROLLGAT. So today, Louis and ROLLGAT will be showing you some of the great benefits that you can get from foam rolling. And for those of you who do not understand what foam rolling is, I will show you some live demonstrations after the PowerPoint today. So I'm going to quickly switch over to my PowerPoint slides. Just make sure this works. And here we go. So today we are going to discuss foam rolling, the concepts of foam rolling, how it works to improve range of motion, how it works to improve flexibility, and how it can even work to decrease pain. And finally, I'm going to illustrate the idea of foam rolling with live demonstrations and talk about whether it's something that's right for you. So before we go any further, I have 4 essential questions that I want to answer today. Any discussion of foam rolling has to cover these aspects because it is not for everyone. And you will find out in the next half hour if it's right for you. The first idea is what foam rolling actually is. So many of you might be unfamiliar with the concept of foam rolling. I will illustrate with some images and the live demonstrations. Secondly, I want to delve a little bit into the physiology of foam rolling. And since this email about the seminar today went out last week, I've had quite a few of you come up to me and say, is foam rolling a gimmick? Are we just trying to sell a product? So I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit. We do have the product in our Glen Eagles retail row in the Healthy Lifestyle Center, but this is a product that I specifically recommended because I believe it's one of the most potent ways that you can take care of your own body, to give yourself a massage and to make yourself feel healthier with less pain. I also want to talk about what differentiates the ROLLGAT from other types of foam rollers, because there are many, many varieties. But why did we choose to bring the ROLLGAT into our retail cabinet? I'll discuss that today. And finally, I want to help teach you how to foam roll with some video demonstrations that you can review anytime, even after the seminar is over. Before I go any further, of course, I want to give a few disclaimers and caveats. None of the information we discussed today is medical advice. So even though we will bring up the ideas of pain, we will talk about the idea of palpating muscle tissue and connective tissue. None of this supersedes the advice of your doctor, and it is not to be taken as such. Secondly, we will discuss the idea of pain, but I make no guarantees this will eliminate your pain. If you have any specific surgeries, let's say you've had some spinal fusions, you need to talk to your doctor before beginning a routine like this, just like you would if you were undergoing an exercise program. When I talk about the theorized mechanisms of how foam rolling actually works to improve your body, understand that the field constantly evolves, and the scientific research that comes out next year might contradict some of the ideas we talk about today. But as far as we know, I will give you my best advice. And finally, make sure you are safe when you're performing these exercises. If you see that you're not able to get on and off the floor in a comfortable manner, it might not be right for you. So just keep that in mind. Here is what foam rolling looks like. And the basic idea is that you take your body and the force of your body weight and you apply it into a spherical roller on the ground. So what that roller does is it presses upwards into your muscle tissue and into your connective tissue. And it's a way of giving yourself a deep tissue massage, much like the kind of massage you would get at the spa. The only difference being it is self-administered. So being that it's self-administered, there are certain things that you need to know before you begin foam rolling, and that's what I want to discuss today. If you have trouble getting on and off the floor or moving yourself comfortably around the floor, the majority of the foam rolling exercises involve the floor, so it might not be the best idea for you. But if you find this is something you're capable of, it'll be well worth checking out. So I have 2 images here to get into a little bit of the science behind foam rolling. And the image here on the left is an anatomical representation of the average Glen Eagles resident. And on the right, we have a cross-sectional area showcasing what a muscle actually looks like from the inside. So if you look at the image on the right, I want you to look at the area that's covered in dark red. That would be a muscle. Now within a muscle, we have bundles of muscle fibers. And as you can see, we have kind of a subdivision of different bundles that fit within a coating. And then the entire muscle is coated. And it's coated with a connective tissue that we call fascia. So just as important as muscle is to function, the connective tissue is just as critical. And that is because the brain and our nervous system is inherently wired to this connective tissue. So when we talk about palpating muscle, I want you to consider that we're also palpating connective tissues. And by releasing tightness in our connective tissues, we can help to attain greater ranges of motion. We can help to attain greater levels of performance. Here are the 4 theorized mechanisms that I'm going to bring up today with regards to foam rolling. The first one is the idea of structural palpation. You are laying on a roller, you weigh X amount of pounds, and a majority of that weight is being pressed into a specific muscle. So when you place that kind of tension, that kind of movement upwards into your muscle and connective tissue, you can help to create freedom in different ranges of motion in tight muscle groups. So for instance, if you find that your shoulders are very tight and you have difficulty reaching over your head, or your hip flexors are very tight because you tend to sit a long time, the foam roller could be a very potent way that you can address tightness by physically moving the tissues around. Next thing is the idea of promoting blood and lymphatic flow. So we all know blood flow. And one of the ways that the foam roller can help with blood flow is by physically bringing the body's attention to it. You're putting tension, you're putting stress into the muscle. The body responds by increasing the blood flow. So if you're recovering from an injury and you need more blood flow to promote more healing, the foam roller is a way to potently do that. Also, what we call lymphatic fluid or lymph, that's our body's system of flushing out toxins. And it's a different fluid than blood, but it also works throughout the muscle to pull toxins, to pull some of the residuals of hard exercise and circulate them and release them from muscle so we have less soreness, possibly less pain, and greater function. The third thing, I want to give you one complicated word today, and that is the idea of a mechanoreceptor. Our muscles have many different receptors in them that basically tell the brain what the muscle is feeling, because there has to be some kind of talking. It's like a walkie-talkie. The supervisor has to know what the person on the floor is seeing. Same thing. So the brain looks at the receptors, and the receptors tell it what's happening. The brain provides the appropriate response. So for most of us who tend to sit long periods of time, we have tension, we have pain, we have adhesion. A lot of that is driven by the nervous system. It's not that the muscle is too short necessarily, it's that the brain's wiring of that muscle is telling it to be too short. Now this is going to sound a little bit contraindicated, but if we take a tight muscle group and we apply a foam roller and more tension on top of that muscle, we actually tell the brain that that area is overloaded with too much tension. What does the brain do? It tells it to relax. So by using very specific methods of rolling, we can get the brain to tell the muscle to relax. And when we do this 3 times a week for 4 weeks out of the month, for 12 months out of the year, we create chronic adaptations to make ourselves more flexible and more limber. And that's a huge concern in this population. The last thing is the idea that foam rolling can decrease our perception of pain, which is called the nociceptive response. So we have pain in different areas of the body, and a lot of times that's caused by a physical ailment of some sort, but not in all cases. If anyone has heard the term phantom pain, that describes the idea where somebody that has an amputated limb continues to feel pain long after that limb is gone. And that is because many of our pain triggers are signals from the brain. So if we're foam rolling and we're rolling and the muscle that we're rolling on is very, very painful, the brain is overloaded with pain triggers, and it actually downregulates. So we feel less pain in subsequent bouts of foam rolling, but also doing other activities. And over time, we can rewire the brain to not respond so strongly with pain signals. And if we can decrease the body's response to pain, we are inherently in less pain. Now, what differentiates the ROLLGAT from other types of foam rollers? So I have a couple of images to showcase this, but the roller on the left would be a traditional foam roller that you would buy on any number of websites or retailers. And as you can see, all foam rollers are spherical. But the difference is the roller on the left has no contour to it. It's just flat across the entire top. So that means that we can't specifically target around our limbs and our core, which tend to be spherical, but have grooves, to have divots. The ROLLGAT allows us to place certain muscles within those grooves to place more tension in the muscle and less tension in the joint structure. And I'll give you a good example. Later on today, I'm going to showcase a supine roll down the back, down the upper back. And your spine would fit in the middle groove of that ROLLGAT, whereas those two little valleys, or whatever you want to call them, on the outsides will help to press more deeply into the spine to get a greater effect on the muscles with less effect on the joints. We also offer a number of different densities of foam rolling because a foam roller is made out of foam. So depending on the hardness of the foam, you are going to get a different kind of response from rolling on top of it. The roller on the far left of the bottom right picture is considered our Panda roller. That is the recommended roller for newcomers or those who are not used to the kind of sometimes abrupt tension that a foam roller can give you. All the colored rollers in the middle are the standard fare rollers that are the ones I would personally recommend. And for those of you who really want a feeling of a deep tissue massage or tend to be a little bit heavier in body weight, I would recommend the black roller on the right, as it is the firmest. So what I want to do now is give you some of the live demonstrations here on the floor for some of the ideas of foam rolling and how we can incorporate them into the routine. So let me just shift back to me. Okay, so we're back on camera here. Everyone can still see me, correct? Okay, so what I'm going to demonstrate are some of the floor-based drills that we can use with the foam roller. And the first one I want to start off showing is how we can roll our legs, specifically our quads, and then I'll move to the glutes and hamstrings later. So given that you have to be able to get onto the floor, that's obviously a prerequisite for the rest of this. But what I'm going to do to roll my legs is always think about rolling distally to proximally. So we want to bring the blood flow and the lymph fluid up into the center of our body. So I'm going to set up with the roller with my legs in these two outer grooves, and I'm going to lay just above the knee joint. And what I'm going to do from here is just slowly roll myself up the roller just below the hips. And then I would tend to roll a little bit faster back down just to kind of reset the position. So it's very slow up here. Now, one of the things a lot of people feel when they first roll are certain spots that are very, very painful in relation to other areas. So for instance, right where I am right now, I feel a pain spot. I'm going to sit in this position for a few seconds because, like I said, we're trying to get the brain to receive that signal that there is too much tension in the area. After we finish, the brain releases the muscle and we have less subsequent tension. Also, when you're rolling on your legs, I like to adjust the position of the toes. So if you notice, I can go toe out to work a little bit more in the inner thigh. And I can also adjust so I'm rolling more towards the outer part of my thigh by turning my toes and shifting my hips slightly. And like I said, you want to start more distally. You want to slowly roll up the leg. You go all the way just before the hip. That would be your quad. Now, with our modern lifestyle of sitting for so many hours per day, one of the muscle groups that gets the tightest on us are the hip flexors, which are just in the front of the, just above the leg here in front of that hip bone. And the reason being is we're always in a seated position, 90-90. So what happens is the hips get very tight. And when the hips get tight, it can throw off our entire alignment of our pelvis and our spine, leading to low back problems. So one of the ways I like to release the hips is by positioning myself just below that hip bone, and I find a position where I can rest right in the hip, and I kind of just pause here. And I do feel this pretty strongly. I roll right in that space just below the hip bone. And I'm in no rush here. I could stay here for 20 seconds, 30 seconds until I start feeling a reduction in the pain and a decrease in the tension across the area. That's when I know that I'm sending the proper signals. And doing this over time, day after day, week after week, month after month, we create the right adaptations. For those of you who are familiar with foam rolling, a lot of people ask me, is it okay to foam roll the IT band? Now, here's the idea with the IT band. If you tend to run a lot or you walk a lot, you play a lot of golf, your IT band might be tight, which is kind of layered on the side of the leg. There are quite a few bundles of nerves right on the outside here, and you'll see a lot of people, if you're familiar with this process, rolling down the leg on the side. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, except for the very top of the hip where you're going to feel that muscle. So just wanted to include that in there. Now, how many of you have heard about sciatica? Lots of people experience sciatica on a regular basis. And what the sciatic nerve does is it originates in the lower part of our back, which is why our back orthopedist will mention it. But it runs through a small muscle in our glute area called the piriformis. Actually runs directly through that muscle and then, of course, radiates down our leg. So one of the foam rolling methods I really like to show people is how we can release the piriformis, how we can release the glute a little bit to give us a little bit less sense of pain due to the tightness of that muscle. So what I'm going to do now is I actually find the seat on the roller. And from, I don't know if you can see on the camera, but I have my knees together. I actually drop one foot just underneath. And now I'm able to roll slightly back and forth on my glute. And you hit certain positions and they'll be very painful. And like I said, you sit here, you roll on it, you release that tension, and it will happen. You will feel a reduction in the tension. So I like to roll with that one leg down position. And then to really target more of the piriformis and less of the glute, I actually go one leg on top if you're flexible enough to do so. And I roll a little bit higher. Now, it's important to note, I am not rolling on my spine. I'm still into my hip, but it gives me a very, very acute sensation of pain that immediately dissipates once I stop rolling. So that's how you know is this a good feeling or not? Well, does it go away when you stop rolling? If it does right away, then it's fine. It should not cause problems. But like I said in my disclaimer, you would like to talk to your doctor before beginning this. So that's how we would roll the hips out. And obviously, you would do both sides. I'm just kind of showing one at a time for time purposes. How many people have tight hamstrings? Hamstrings are the muscles in the back of the thighs here. One of the things you can do, once again, you find those grooves in the ROLLGAT. So we find the outer groove, and we can lay it just under the hamstring. And if I want even more tension, I can kind of lay the other leg on top of it. And now I can roll slightly back and forth on the leg. I tend to go slower coming up the body. And at a certain point, you feel that tension, you just pause there, you just relax. But foam rolling should typically be done slowly. So this can be thought of as a routine. Not something you would necessarily do in 2 minutes before you exercise, but it could be an entire day. It could be an entire half hour of your week that you spend doing this, but it will pay dividends in the long run. Now, let's say people have tight calves. If any of you walk a lot, you tend to have tight calves. And Once again, we can fit within the surface of the ROLLGAT to find your calf muscle just above the ankle. And this one's a little tougher if you don't have a slippery floor because you kind of want to slide down it. But what I'll do is apply that other leg on top for tension, and I slowly work my way towards my knee. And I reach a certain point just like this, and it's painful, but I can feel the release after a few seconds of holding. You might even want to move through it slowly. You might even want to contract the ankle. See how I'm moving? I'm pedaling my right foot here. You can play with this. You can experiment a little bit, but wherever you feel that acute sensation of discomfort is what we are striving for when it comes to foam rolling. Now, one of the most common uses of the foam roller is rolling the spine. And here is my advice. If we looked at our spine from the side, we have natural curvature starting in the neck. Then we have our thoracic or middle part of our back curved this way, kind of outwards from the body. And then, of course, we have our lower back, which once again has what we call a lordotic arch. As a general rule, when you're rolling on your back, I would avoid rolling in the lower part of the back because that's where most people tend to have their back issues. And that's where we might want to avoid direct upward tension. So the roll that I'm going to show you here is going to be more upper back specific. So I'm going to have you position this behind you. And I want you to set up with your elbows on first, or where you can feel your forearms. And then we're going to sink right on the roller, so you're bridging your hips up into that roll. Now right here, this feels like someone's giving me a chair massage in my upper back. I go hands overhead to really open up my spine mobility, and I slowly roll down just the upper back up until about the midpoint, right about here, and then I'll come right back up. So I'm kind of using my feet to pull me and push me. I can go forwards, and then I can go backwards, and I hope you can see from this angle how it's helping to open up my range of motion in my upper body. So we see so many of our friends, maybe even yourself, you tend to find yourself walking in a bit of a hunched position. The foam roller helps us to completely reverse that position under a nice level of stretch. What we can also do here is give ourselves more of a hug and expose those deeper muscles between our scapula, between our shoulder blades. And we can really feel as though somebody's hands are rolling all the way down the spine, and it feels really amazing. Some people even find that it causes their back to pop a little bit, almost like they're in a chiropractor, but that is essentially a side effect of that upward pressure. So those would be my primary recommendations for starting off with the roller. I would start prone. We think about the leg. We think about rolling the quads. Then we find ourselves on our back, and we work out those hips, specifically those tight areas like the piriformis that I mentioned. Then we can move down. We work the hamstrings. We work the calves. We basically hit the entire lower body by that point. And then we work into the spine. We help to create that mobility through the spine, the ability to get ourselves out of that hunched position, to working towards more of a nice tall position. And then what I'd like to show real fast here are some of the things you can do for your upper body. These tend to require a bit more supervision. So my recommendation would be, if you've seen any of these that you want to try, but you're not exactly sure how to set up, please visit us at the Healthy Lifestyle Center. One of us would be happy to bring a roller out and actually show you the position. So what I'll do for the upper body now, let's say I want to work right underneath here. This is called our lat muscle, and it leads into the group of muscles about here called the rotator cuff. We've all heard of the rotator cuff. So one of the ways that I position myself, I'm going to be facing away, but you can see the angle here. I kind of lay on my side, and I place the roller just underneath the armpit. Now, you don't get a lot of leverage to roll here, but it's not really necessary. I just move a couple inches forward, a couple of inches back. And I think a lot of you would be shocked how much you feel it just underneath in that lat. What you can also do And this works better, I would say, if you had a table or something where you can elevate, but I'll show you from the floor. Let's say you want to work the front of the shoulder. You want to kind of get a little massage in the front of the shoulder. You can actually position yourself where that little bulb here kind of fits right into that shoulder. See that? So right from here, I can kind of roll. It's a little slippery here, but I can roll. There it is, right across that shoulder. And all I'm doing is rocking back and forth, but it feels so potent. Helping, like I said in the first bullet point, structural mobility. I'm helping to move the muscle, to move the tendons, to move the ligaments. We can help to loosen up the shoulder, creating greater ranges of motion with less pain. And shoulder range of motion is critical not only for general health, but for playing golf, for playing tennis. Think about some of those positions you're hitting from. Think about if you had a club in your hand and you need to get the shoulder, the ability to turn without restriction. All of that is going to be critical when we think about some of these drills. Last thing I want to show today are a couple of the exercises you can do for the arms. I don't recommend these on the floor, so I'm actually going to use my knee almost like a table, but if you had a countertop at home, you can mimic the same thing. Think about the tricep. That's the muscle right in the back of the arm. And you place this on a table, not on your knee, but what you can do is basically roll back and forth, placing a bit of downward stress onto the arm, and you will feel a strong sense of discomfort, strong sense of pain, but as soon as you finish, it goes away. And then your arm feels looser, you feel better, it feels warmed up. A lot of times athletes even use the foam roller to warm up before their practices, before their games, and before their workouts. So this has tremendous merit if you're willing to put in that small bit of effort to learn the positions, to understand it. The final one I want to talk about are the biceps. So we don't think too often about the bicep, but that's one of the muscles that gets very tight because we tend to sit a lot, use a lot of computers with our arm in a position of deep flexion. So picture me on a cabinet. So let's say I had a cabinet maybe 36 inches high. I'm either kneeling, I could be standing. And what I'm going to do basically is fit the roller underneath my bicep, and I'm going to be rolling back and forth. Now, I'm not getting it here, but if I had a table and I lean the body into it, you could actually roll through your arm. So in summary, I took this foam roller, and in just a few minutes, I basically give myself a massage from head to toe. I start here, we work the legs, we work the hips, we work all the way down into the ankle, we work the core. Obviously, I'm skipping the stomach. A lot of times, you wouldn't want to push directly into your stomach, but you can see from ground up, we're helping to alleviate tension in the body. And it doesn't all have to be done in one day either. Let's say you took one day and you just work your legs. One day you just work your hips. One day you just work your arms. But over time, you are helping to rewire the brain's pathways for tension and pain, potentially leading to greater ranges of motion and improved performance. I want to thank you all for listening today. If you'd like to hear this presentation again or share it with anyone, it will be available on demand. And I thank you so much for your time. Have a good night. Thank you.
I was going to make sure. Okay, I want to stop. I thought I left the meeting and I thought I stopped the recording, but I did not. We'll have them clip the end.
How long was